Welcome to Esoteric America, a podcast where we tour the strange, mystical, and esoteric pathways hidden beneath the surface of America. Join Mark, Tara, Roman, Chad, and a new local researcher each episode as we dive into our country's diverse regions, states, counties, cities, towns, neighborhoods, parks, etc., leaving no stone unturned as we unravel the cult knots that tie history, culture, religion, all in with fringe elements that you may not have realized were at play in your own backyard. Today, co-host and our friend, author and researcher Chad Stuemke takes us on a journey through his home state as he guides us through Detroit, Michigan.
Three nights in a row is sweet.
We saw that.
Wow.
We went on a night drive and saw it, and with the trees silhouetting like the night sky and the stars and the bright orange moon. Yeah, it was beautiful.
But it's not orange here, and I get out early as fuck because the dogs are always barking at the wee hours, and it looks just like a normal moon. So I mean, the fires are closer here. So I wonder, I mean, it can't be the fires. That's crazy. If they're saying it's the fires.
We're talking, they could be, but we're also talking 3-4 in the morning. So the sun's just about to come up. So, maybe it could be that too.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of strange celestial happenings right now when we talk about like the space agency peoples and stuff. So whatever type of
satellites.
Yeah, I don't even know, man. Like I've been seeing way more lights in the sky past few weeks. Like same spot, like 20 minutes apart from each other. I set my phone timer for 20 minutes because I was like, there's no way that I can go out again in 20 minutes, stand in the same spot and see the same moving light in the sky between the Big Dipper. There's no way. I saw it 5 times in a row, and it's just there's just been a lot more sightings lately. So I don't even know, because there's a bunch of planets in alignment and retrograde right now as well, and so we're just living in crazy times, baby, crazy times.
Is the Mars? Do you think Mars in Gemini? I don't know if Mars in Gemini has anything to do with it. Probably not, but. With the orange, but that wouldn't make sense. Mars somehow reflecting onto the moon, but no.
Mars had diarrhea for a little bit.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, like it helped propel it across the orbit faster because it was propelling diuretic.
Is that the proper term? Are you you're studying the bowels of Mars now?
Yeah, no, like a literal, like it's a fucking actual fart, and like you can hear it.
First Roman studies resonant architecture. Now he's studying flatulent architecture.
Yes, exactly. Statues built by. So Neil Armstrong. Okay. Oh no, not Neil Armstrong. No, Lance Armstrong. Wait, Louis Armstrong. How many?
All
arms?
the Armstrongs. Scott
So many
Armstrong,
strong arms.
podcaster. I actually just put out a podcast with Scott Armstrong, podcast guy today.
Oh,
shit.
whoa, no shit. Okay,
Yeah.
crazy.
Synchro.
Wait, you put the episode out?
Yeah, it came out today.
Wow,
Every Monday
weird.
I put an episode out. Maybe you don't listen to my show, but every Monday.
I don't know what day, dude. First of all, I live a groundhog life. Okay,
I know
living
you
here
do.
on the farm is a literal wake up every
You're
day.
dressed like a groundhog right now. Look at what's going on with your hair.
That's a bandana, baby.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I thought that was like your bangs like all like up like that.
No, I'm like trying to get more into my 50s mom housewife vibe. You know, like my husband's an astronaut. And I'm just waiting for him to come home, taking care of the kids and the neighbors' kids and the other neighbors' kids because they all work, but I'm the only stay-at-home mom.
Yeah, well, hey, it's 2022, so you know anything goes, right? You could role play, you could be a 50s mom, you could do. I mean, the glasses certainly are taking you back 30 decades, that's for sure. But here we are, rolling in very slowly into this fun episode of Esoteric America with just the hosts. No guests today. We're going to be looking at Chad's home, Michigan, specifically Detroit. Correct, Chad?
Yeah, today we're going to focus on downtown Detroit. Absolutely.
Right on. Well, we don't have to get
Nice.
too quickly into it. I like, just kind of hanging and chilling. And yeah, we started talking about the moons. The moons have definitely been interesting lately. I've also heard that a planet is going into retrograde for the next few months, which is a strange thing for it to be in retrograde for this long. So I guess until February, Mars is going to be in retrograde. So yeah, I don't know what that means for this show, but maybe we'll be able to channel some of those energies into this show in a positive way. That's what I'm hoping. But
I think
Yes.
Mars was in Gemini over the summer or
in retrograde,
last year.
or was it?
Yeah.
Well,
Does anyone
There's
remember that?
alignments happening right now that are
Roman wasn't
little out of the
there,
norm.
but his co-host Dan was, I believe. Juan had a podcast a week ago, and a guest that was on was talking about this. Kaylee, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But anyway, so here we are, Esoteric America. And Detroit has its own energy that is bubbling up from it. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, Roman and I have both interviewed you on our respective podcasts, Chad, so maybe people can go there for a more in-depth story. But would you mind giving us a little like 101 on your interaction with Detroit, how you first got into this type of research, like what first piqued your interest and got you studying Detroit in this particular area that we're going to talk about?
Initially, what got me into all this was I had a couple UFO sightings, and I wasn't into anything like this. And I had a UFO sighting, and it just, caused me to go out and try to figure out what was going on. And the first sighting, I actually didn't tell anybody about it besides my wife. Didn't tell my best friend, didn't tell anybody. And long story short, I was living in Detroit, and one of my best friends happened to get murdered. And I was at the scene of the crime, and let's say it flipped a switch in me or something. And I knew or believed I knew who had committed the crime. Now I was on my way back to retaliate. And I was very close to returning, almost there, driving my truck alone. And a voice came into my head for the first time ever and literally just said, "Go home." That was it. Just no tone to it, just said, "Go home." And for some reason, I did. I stopped, I turned around, I went home. And on the way home, I stopped at the bookstore. I was standing in the bookstore looking for the first time at a row of books that was the metaphysical section. I was looking for something on people who'd passed away. I was thinking about my buddy or something. And a row of books fell off the shelf directly in front of my feet, and I picked them up, put them back on the shelf. Yep, and the last one I was putting back on the shelf, I just happened to glance at it, and it was Zachariah Sitchin, The 12th Planet. So I decided, I didn't really know what it was about, but it sounded kind of cool. It was talking about Sumerian mythology on the back, so I took it home and read it, and it was about aliens and stuff. And it blew my mind. I went out and I bought the rest of the series, read the Zachariah Sitchin Earth Chronicles series in about 2 weeks. And the last day I was finishing up the book, it happened to pop up on the internet that he was doing a conference in Chicago. So I hopped in the car and went to Chicago and caught one of Zachariah Sitchin's last conferences. And on the way home, I had this experience where, well, for one, it was the first time I talked to anybody about this. My world just felt different, felt amazing. And I was driving home, Bob Marley Redemption song was playing on my radio. I was blazing one, and a mist broke out over I-94, and this giant rainbow emerged. And it was as if the end of this rainbow was refracting off the concrete. The entire interior of my car looked like a rainbow. I looked in the rearview mirror, and my face all looked like a rainbow. I thought I was kind of going crazy. And I looked at the car next to me, and they're looking around too. They're all having the kind of same experience. And I realized we're all doing about 20 miles an hour, and we're on the highway. We should be doing 70. Everybody's doing about 20. And just taking this experience, I guess. So I pulled off at the exit, closest exit, so I could take some pictures. Took some pictures and got home, and that was kind of the end of it. You know, told my wife what amazing rainbow experience I had after this conference. And well, long story short, I woke up that night from the most vivid dream I've ever had in my life. And in this dream, I was floating up towards this rainbow, and a red UFO came shooting out of the rainbow, hovered in front of me, and transmitted a voice. Something said, investigate the rainbow. In my head, I heard investigate the rainbow. And I woke up. And it was so real. This is back in the day when these were old cameras where you had to take the camera and take it to your computer and download the pictures. And I was tired from getting home that night, so I didn't even put the pictures on the computer yet. I got up at 3:14 in the morning, went in the computer room, downloaded the pictures, and sure enough, on that rainbow picture is that red UFO, clear as day. And that was the moment that really triggered me. You know, investigate the rainbow over the years turned into me looking into the Rainbow Bridge, you know, the gateway of the gods. And that turned into me looking into ancient mound sites, Native American lore and the ancient mound sites. Long story short, led me downtown Detroit to one of my favorite parks I've always been visiting. So when I got down to my favorite park I've always been visiting and looked at it in a new light, all this incredible symbolism started to emerge. And that's what I'm going to start showing you guys tonight.
Dude, wow. I don't think I had heard that first part. And yeah, wow, that's really powerful, man. Maybe it was your friend's spirit that knocked that bookshelf over. That's crazy.
Possible. Yeah. I've always wondered, and I don't tell that story too often, but that was what, you know, propelled me into this field. Absolutely.
The rainbow. Go ahead.
Could you be opening the Rainbow Bridge right now?
Maybe.
I don't know. It's like if before that anybody would have ever told me I'd be researching rainbows and the Rainbow Bridge, I would have laughed out loud, you know. But you go through my work over the years, it keeps reappearing, the symbol of the Rainbow Bridge, and it'll be in my presentation today too. Mm-hmm. It just happens to keep showing up for whatever reason.
Well, let's get into it, because I know you have quite a lengthy presentation for us, and we might need to do 2, maybe 3 parts to get through the whole thing, but that's all right. We're going to do it. We're going to get to it. And yeah, I'm excited because what this brings to is the opportunity for people who live in your area to potentially share some information with you that you weren't aware of yet, which I'm sure you've combed through a lot of it. But that's the point here is eventually Roman will do an episode on his local area. He's got so many that it's probably going to take a coin toss or something to determine which one he'll start with.
No. I already got it. Got it. I already started it. I have a couple slides. So next is
awesome. You called dibs on next. And Tara and I have our little special place here in New England that we'll talk about as well. So you can, as a listener, expect an episode about our hometowns. And then once we sort of call dibs, it'll feel easier to allow other people to come on, because we wouldn't want someone to come on and talk about Detroit before Chad does, or you know, New England or whatever. So we'll get our chances out of the way here, and you know, anyways, enough talking for me. Chad, let's get into it. Roman, you got any thoughts before we start here? Good to go? Awesome.
Let me share my screen here. Okay, let's see. Okay, you guys seeing that?
Yep.
Oh yeah, it's such a lovely background.
Okay, Esoteric America slide. All right. Well, first of all, thank you guys for letting me present this. I'm super excited. I have quite the journey to take you guys on. I got 300 slides, so we probably won't make it through tonight, obviously. But once I get rolling, man, just feel free to jump in at any time. You know, cut me off, because once I get rolling, sometimes I'm going. So please cut me off, ask questions, you know, anytime. So we're going to, like I talked about earlier in the beginning, we're going to talk about Stargate Detroit today, downtown Detroit. And my research, I always like to show these ancient slides of ancient landscapes before I start. This is the Serpent Mound, if you're just listening. And the point is that cultures for thousands of years, maybe longer, have been aligning pieces of art and architecture on the ground and correlating to the heavens, hoping to create connection points, portals, consciousness portals, ways to connect with other realms. And today, the same scenario seems to be taking place in the hearts of many of our cities, where once stood ancient landscapes. The modern art and architecture is emerging with some of the same exact symbolism, in particular gateway symbolism, portal symbolism. So I'm just showing you a couple pieces of architecture to prove the point that this is happening everywhere. It's not just Detroit we're going to talk about. It's happening in cities across the country. Today, though, we're going to talk about a plaza dear to my heart, Hart Plaza, downtown Detroit off the Detroit River. It sits in the shadow of the Renaissance Center. And there is ancient Egyptian symbolism. It's correlated to the stars. There's Stargate, gateway symbolism. And I like to point out right off the bat, when I say Stargate and gateways, I'm not saying that in Hart Plaza there's a literal Stargate that you're going to be able to walk through and I can go visit Romy in an instant. What I'm saying is these are places where I think you can connect with other realms, past, present, sometimes even life and death. So before we get to the art and architecture, it's always important to, I think, go through a little bit of the past and a little bit of the history. That'll make a lot of the symbolism make a lot more sense. So Detroit is on an international border. The border is the Detroit River. It borders Windsor, Canada. And from its inception, there used to be ancient mounds dotting both sides of the landscape, all the way down the Detroit side and all the way down the Canadian side. This was a sacred landscape for Native Americans across the entire Midwest.
So those little triangles there are supposed to be mounds on the map?
Yes, all those triangles are mounds.
So there's
And if
probably
you see
about
that little-
20 to 25 or 30 or so. That's a lot.
At least, and that's an underestimation too. When you look at the actual blueprints of some of the mounds and the areas around there were more than that. That's just kind of, they put a couple dots on there to show you. But if I was to guess, I'd say it's closer to 50 to 75, maybe even 100 mounds along this area. There were a lot of them. This was a major point. And one of the most sacred parts of this landscape right here was what's called Belle Isle. This was the sacred island. And the legend and the lore of this island has a gatekeeper and portal symbolism. This was the home of Chief Sleeping Bear, and Chief Sleeping Bear was a demigod, and he had a daughter who was so beautiful, he used to keep her tied up in a canoe and covered with a sheet so the other natives wouldn't see her. Well, one day the west wind, as the legend goes, blew off the sheet and the canoe got loose, and the neighboring island of the gatekeeper, this was the realm of the gatekeeper, he happened to catch a glimpse of the daughter, pulled the daughter ashore, took her back to his wigwam, had his way with her, and, well, Chief Sleeping Bear found out, wasn't happy, and killed the gatekeeper. Brought his daughter back to Belle Isle, and he immortalized her as a white female deer, as the story goes. So she's known as the serpent goddess because he surrounded the island with serpents, and she immortalized him as a white female deer. Now, the gatekeeper spirit was said to still occupy the island. So Native Americans over hundreds of years would go to this island and try to converse with the gatekeeper before they went into wars. And I call this a consciousness portal. They would go there. Chief Pontiac in particular was one of the famous chiefs. He went there and spent a week or two conversing and meditating with the gatekeeper before he went to war with the British and the French. And, you know, to me, this was a consciousness portal. This was a sacred landscape. So that's the first legend of a portal. Now you travel just down the river, about a mile south down the river, and the next legend takes place at the Great Mound. Now, the Great Mound was enormous. The base of it was said to be the size of the Great Pyramid, and this was where the natives would come and bury their dead. And they would have what's called the Huron Feast of the Dead. Every 7 to 10 years, the natives from around the whole Midwest would come. They would bury their dead here, and that's how the mound continued to grow over the years until it became what was known as the Great Mound. So this, to the Native Americans, was absolutely a portal to the afterlife. So we have the consciousness portal at Belle Isle. Just downriver, we had the Great Mound. This was the portal to the afterlife. So this kind of brings us up the timeline, or the supposed timeline, to the 1700s, when white man starts to come to Detroit. This is Antoine Cadillac, French explorer. Him and his crew, they came out of Montreal, Canada, and they're looking for the perfect place to pull ashore and formed the Renaissance city of Detroit. And, well, they see all these Native American mounds and figure this must be the perfect spot. So they pull ashore, and the first fort they build here in Detroit is they tear down some mounds and they build Fort Detroit. And as you can see from this map, it resembles a star fort, but this was an early version of the star forts, and they built it out of cedar posts. Well, the Native Americans weren't having it, and they eventually came and they burnt it down. So a few years later, the British come to town. And they think, well, you know, this ancient mound site where the French had their fort looks like a pretty good place. So we'll put our fort relatively nearby. So about a block away, they built themselves a star fort. Well, the Native Americans, once again, weren't having it. So they burnt the British star fort down. Well, the British got wise, so they moved across the river and they built themselves an earthen star fort. Real nice looking one. And they never really used it for battle or anything. They ended up turning it into an insane asylum. So Fort Meldine in Canada, the Star Fort, became an insane asylum. And back on the Detroit side, they were building another insane asylum near the Great Mound. But also near the Great Mound is where the Americans decided it was time to build their star fort. So if you look at the map up top here, you can see they built Fort Wayne in the red, and they tore down some more Native American mounds, built it right next to the Great Mound. And when they did renovations on Fort Wayne back in the 80s, they actually found Native American bones within these earthen walls. So what they figured out happened is when they tore down all these mounds that used to be in this area, they used those mounds to actually build the star fort here. So
wow,
pretty sad scenario. And all that's left. Go, please.
Can I just comment on how weird it was that they have those window boxes that they were keeping those people in the insane asylum? What kind of test is that? Like, see how they could, like, if they were itching themselves or something? Like, what is going on with that? They're wearing, like, some kind of... Roman, are you seeing this?
It's crazy. Well, I was wondering, man, because super interesting that a lot of these old hospitals and asylums and things like that are always put on mound areas, and a lot of times the mounds, I'll say oftentimes the mounds are in electromagnetically hot spots or on ley lines and things. And so then you look at what hospitals and insane asylums are. They got all these crazy experiments going on where there's a lot of heightened electricity. So, you know, the harnessing of that, because that's the other talk with the star forts is, you know, that they're using the sacred geometry to harness some sort of energy from the land, kind of like a crop circle. In retrospect, like the shape resonates like that certain sort of frequency of the land or the area. And so I was just, as we were doing this, I was trying to Google and find like how many insane asylums are on electromagnetic hotspots and things, because it's a great rabbit hole, and one of my favorite ones too. I love looking into asylums. My favorite season of American Horror Story, season 2.
Must give you that sense of home too, huh, Roman?
Oh yeah, dude. I'm trying to find my way back. It's like, where's my dad? Some strange Russian doctor in the hills.
Oh man, no, I'm guilty of it too. All right, well, thanks for entertaining that, Roman and Chad. I just wanted to go back and look at this slide. Hopefully that was a temporary place that those people were kept, not permanently kept there. But wow, what a weird thing. But it makes sense. I've always thought my instinct is like, put the crazy people there so no one will discuss the paranormal portal phenomena that's going on, because if anyone hears word of what goes on in these places, they'll just chalk it up to the crazy people in the insane asylum.
Yeah, right. Like they say that the most crazy people are shamans too.
You mean like?
I mean, because we all really are, but it's people that
you mean like schizophrenia
I read
and shamanism
once.
Okay.
That and also, I read an article once that said that people that are experiencing schizophrenia or something like that, they're coming into contact with other spiritual beings, and they just don't know how to channel it properly, I guess.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, like, if you were just moving to these towns, moving to these areas, and these areas have been used by native peoples for a long time, especially for spiritual practices or, specific type of ceremonial purposes, and you're having all these like celestial downloads, you're having all these spiritual downloads all the time. You're just like, you start waking up, but compared to, the tyrannical, world of living with the French and the Spanish, and the New World Order peoples, you wouldn't know what the fuck's going on. And maybe that's why like a bunch of these people were thrown into asylums. I don't even know the numbers. I'm gonna start looking up numbers. I'm also done. Chad, thank you so much, brother. This is way more in depth than the one you came on to Rising from the Ashes. I see how it is. I love it though.
Well, he's studied up on.
You brought up an awesome point, Romy. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to compliment you and say the reason why your presentation has been beefed up so much, and the same is true for my show too. There's so much more new information. But Roman, I mean, Chad has time when he's not on our show, so obviously he's been, adding to all of what he's researching. I mean, come on. Of course he's gonna have more stuff for us.
I love it.
I got a couple things hidden up my sleeve.
Yes,
but
sir.
Roman, you brought up an awesome point, man, when you said, they build these insane asylums on these mound sites. And there's, for some reason, the government builds on these mound sites. The insane asylums built on these mound sites. And the World's Fairs built on these mound sites. And I mentioned the Great Mound was still left. Well, that was until 1889 when the Detroit's World Fair tore it down, built over it. And they actually, if you look close back here, you can see Fort Wayne, the Star Fort, right there behind the fairgrounds. Right here's the Star Fort, here's the fairgrounds. They built this whole fairgrounds in 7 years. And they actually would allow the fairgoers to dig into the ancient Great Mound. And any relics or bones in particular they found, because that's what the fairgoers were looking for. They were looking for bones to take home. They could take home for a quarter. And what remained of the mound, after they got through with digging up the bones, they used what remained of the mound to tamp down the dust on the fairgrounds. So everybody wouldn't get so dusty. They used sand to tamp down the dust. So you can see these fairgoers would literally be walking around on top of the ancient remnants of the Native American Great Mound, the one sacred mound that the natives came to from around this whole region. So I'm just showing you a couple things here that was taking place at the fair. This guy, he was Professor Bartholomew, and he would go up and do tricks from these balloons. At this time, there was no airplanes or anything yet. So the big draw was to see people fly around. And if you paid enough, you could actually go up in these balloons here. And like I said, the draw was you got the bird's eye view perspective. There weren't skyscrapers yet. People hadn't been up in airplanes yet. So nobody had really had that perspective of looking down. So that's what this was all about. You could go up in these balloons and look down, but they couldn't promise where you would come down. So there, you could go anywhere from a couple miles to, some people were landing across the river over in Canada and couldn't get back across the river, but this was the big draw at the fair. So, that was.
So someone's auntie went to the fair and ended up in Canada and never came home.
They eventually probably got home, but it might have taken, they would have had to find themselves a boat ride back across the river. But yeah, they couldn't guarantee where you went. It was up to the wind that day.
Damn.
So
those are
unfortunately
some prolific balloons right there too. Look at those.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're scary looking, man. Look at that. But like Sam said on Tinfoil Hat, man, these people had balls back then to get up in a balloon, take off in a balloon, not knowing where you're going to come down. That's ballsy for sure. So we talked about the downtown Detroit stamping out. Mm-hmm. But there are other mounds in the area that ancient relics were being discovered in that, they were declared forgeries. But the Native Americans claimed these mounds weren't made by them. The natives claimed that ancient ancestors from legends had made these mounds and dug for copper. So these are what we call the Michigan Relics, and in mounds across the state, but not the Native American mounds, not the circular mounds, not the geometric mounds, not the Great Mound, just other conical mounds across the state. They found upwards of 20 to 30,000, possibly more, of these relics. There is all clay, copper, slate. Very intricate. And if you look close, the symbol here, they call this the mystical symbol, the mystical Michigan symbol. And every single relic would have the symbol incorporated somewhere on it. So I'm showing you some of the clay relics.
Isn't that like the sippy bird? Like the bird like that sips from the cup, that old toy that they would give kids? Kind of reminds me of that, like a bird leading towards a cup of water.
Yeah, very very similar. Very similar.
That
And they
drawing,
think that
so this
symbol,
art piece here on the left, what is that? Like how old is that? Because that was incredibly intricate.
this one here.
Yeah.
Well, well, according to archaeologists, they're, from the 1920s. They're all forgeries. All 20 to 30,000 of these are supposedly forgeries. And the archaeologist story is that these two guys, I call them the culprits, Father James Savage and Daniel Soper, had built, engraved all of these relics in a shop somewhere, all these copper relics, slate relics, clay relics, and went across the state of Michigan, found ancient mounds, dug into the mounds, buried the relics, went back to Detroit, and found witnesses to go back and dig into the mounds and uncover the relics, because they had highly acclaimed witness with them all the time. And this is the time of horse and buggy, mind you. It's not like they're driving cars around. This is time of horse and buggy. And they say these guys did this 10, 20, 30,000 times, which the numbers don't add up. It's impossible.
What?
Plus these guys this was the 1920s. And I happened to find in an 1848 encyclopedia, Michigan Relics first discovered. So these guys weren't even born at that point. But the archaeologists point the finger at these two gentlemen here.
Can you go back one more
of the
page?
main archaeologists.
Because these, okay, I just wanted to look at some of this, like, so the one that we brought up, like the page right before this, and then this one here in the top left corner, it's got the, okay, is that in the middle?
Sorry.
I didn't know if that little checkerboard was part of the art, or is that a ruler of sorts to like put for size? Because I was like, well, that's a Masonic that's a Masonic board right there.
Yeah.
No, that's a ruler.
That is a ruler.
Okay, it's a ruler. I was like, I thought it was kind of out of place, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
interesting. They're just like leaving it clearly very Masonic.
Yeah. All these pictures here with these rulers, these came from the Michigan Historical Museum. It took me a good 2 to 3 years of begging these guys to let me in to see these relics you see these pictures of. Right now, they're in a back room collecting dust at the Michigan Historical Museum. They're not on display anywhere. So after a couple of years, I got in there. They gave me these couple of photos here with all these rulers on them. But like I said, they say that they have the only collection in the country. They have 2 to 3,000 of them. But it's documented 20 to 30,000 have been discovered. And I've actually been to people's houses in Detroit that have their own collection that's been handed down through their family.
Wow.
So this is one collection I discovered personally. I call it the Ted Bell collection. You can see, he's got the pictures of his Uncle Theodore here, who passed down these relics, dug them up himself.
What?
So the archaeologist story is not true. Yeah, these are all, look at some of these. You got mortuary boxes.
What?
Calendars.
And what are the family
pieces.
stories of, wow, the calendars are cool. What are the family stories of the timelines of these actually coming through?
Late 1800s, mid 1800s, late 1800s to the early 1900s. Now, once the 1920s came along and we had the guys I told you about, the culprits, the papers and the archaeologists were so dead set against these because of the theology on these. If you look on these, they're not a Native American theology and they're not a Christian theology. They're kind of a mishmash, a Gnostic, a Coptic, Egyptian. Exactly.
Yeah. Trip out.
But there's no way to the archaeologists that these could be discovered in Native American mounds. So they were considered forgeries. Right off the bat, they actually had relics destroying parties where people from across the state would bring their relics and smash them into big piles. And, that's how numerous these relics were. But like I said, to this day, this story they're still considered a forgery and a hoax. But the numbers don't make sense that these two guys could have created these upwards of 30,000 ancient relics. And if you're listening to this show, please take the time to look at some of the visuals, because these are intricate. These ain't just little smiley faces. These are intricate relics.
How's that Sphinx box down there?
And that could be easily refuted. You can have somebody who is an expert in the way handwriting is stylized. I forget the name of the science, but if you got enough of these relics together and had someone do a handwriting test, you could easily disprove that one or two single people wrote all this. If you could prove that multiple people wrote these, then that would be it would make it very more likely that they were not forged, which I already don't believe. I don't buy that, because how could you trust that? But it's going to take this story getting out to more people. But I mean, I've heard, and I know Roman's interviewed Rick Osman as well, but Brad Olson also talks about this. These ancient Phoenicians that came and got copper out of the Great Lakes. So, there's definitely an alternative timeline that this fits into.
Yeah, perfect, Mark. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that actually has happened. A judge by the name of Henriette Mertz, and she actually wrote a book about this after she did this. It's called The Mystic Symbol. Very important book if anyone wants to look it up. And she was a judge and a professional handwriting analysis. And she took a look at these, and right here on the bottom of this slide, I got quotes from her. She said, "One peculiar thing stood out. Even though the letters may be a mixture, the mixture within itself appeared consistently uniform. Now, analysis such as would be acceptable in any recognizable court showed that the writing had not been forged. Each tablet had been written by a different hand. No two tablets bore characteristics stemming from one single hand."
There you go.
So a professional analysis says these weren't done by the same person. And there was another analysis, did the same study and came up with the same conclusion, but also added, if they were trying to forge these, it'd be very shaky. It wouldn't be perfectly consistent. And, they said these are perfectly consistent. There was no hesitation in the writing style. In their professional opinions, these were legit. So that's where the story lays today. For one, even here in Michigan, many people have never even heard of these things. They've been pretty much forgotten about. And the couple people who have heard of them, they just consider them forgeries. But, I'm not so sure. Could they be forgeries? Could a couple be forgeries? Maybe. But it's either the best forgery story ever, and there needs to be a movie about it, because it's an awesome story. Somehow these guys pulled this off.
It's interesting.
It's one of the most amazing stories ever, if it's not.
Well, it's interesting because we're told that democracy was created in Greece and Rome, and then we're told that the idea of the Confederacy, gave all these ideas to the founding fathers, from the Confederacy of the Native Americans. So, I mean, it does line up that maybe these Native Americans who were here were some kind of a mixture of people who existed in North America and mixed with early settlers of, from Europe, Vikings and Phoenicians. And that's why we see like sort of a mixing of like North American and European culture in these, not because they're forgeries, but because there actually was trading going on between those two cultures.
I'm thinking Atlantean remnants, yo.
Right.
Like if the timeline skewed, just the symbolism in here, it's like, it is such a strange style that's like, it's Coptic, because you see the snake coming out of some of the heads here, but then incredibly almost like modern Masonic from like anywhere from within the last couple centuries as well. So
but if this predates Masonry, then would it be that the Masons are?
Well, it looks like cuneiform on there too.
It also kind of has cuneiform.
It's like a crazy blend going on here with the style.
Well, it could. Where were they found?
Because a lot of this wasn't in books at the time. A lot of this wasn't in books yet. Egyptian hieroglyphs weren't in books yet. Your average person couldn't get a hold of Egyptian hieroglyphs to copy down even.
Yeah. Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, it's so interesting. One thing too, I mean, just being at the head of the river and the head of the ports, you know, whether you want to, what you want to call the head, you know, if we're moving down south towards the Ecuador from here and traveling back and forth from Mesoamerica, you know, through the Mississippi River chain and everything, and the mound building, you know, we've talked about it on this show, you know, right? And about the mounds being potential for like storage facilities or, you know, ports along the river. Maybe Detroit was like this like headway where they came to bring relics from all over that mound building society of sorts or something like that. Like, I don't know. That's a lot. I mean, that's more than I've heard of any relics being found anywhere else in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. No, the one connection that is possible is we have the ancient copper mining that took place in the Upper Peninsula. It dates back anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 years ago, and there's lots of copper pieces in here. There's always that possible Atlantic.
There is also, I think, up along the Ojibwe Nation up there, they would find the cowrie shells along, I forget the name of the river where Pontchartrain is. And they don't know how they got there either. So maybe like, and they were said to trade with the Palladians or, you know, aliens again.
Wow.
So maybe it's
with the date, we're not quite at Atlantis with 6,000, 8,000 years, but Phoenicians very well could have been a culture that would have been more in touch with their Atlantean roots. So it's not maybe necessarily as true to say that these are Atlantean artifacts, but like post-Atlantean artifacts. So like people who had kind of survived the cataclysm that struck Atlantis.
And how high is Detroit? Is it a mountainous range? Like how high? What's the sea level elevation that you're at?
No, it's Detroit's relatively flat. Most of lower Michigan is relatively flat until you get to northern Michigan and the Upper Peninsula. That's not even mountainous, very hilly.
I'd imagine the Great Lakes
is relatively flat.
The Great Lakes are at sea level or a little bit above sea level, right? They're not.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Cool. Well, let's keep grooving through here. We're at the gates.
Let's go.
All right. So that was the majority of the ancient mounds and some of the destroying of the ancient mounds and the discarding of the ancient relics. We're going to get back to downtown Detroit as they're actually going to build the city now. And this is Augustus Woodward. And Augustus Woodward was best friends with Thomas Jefferson. He was considered Thomas Jefferson's disciple. He was a Freemason, and he was considered an esoteric researcher. And Thomas Jefferson sent him to Detroit after the Detroit's Great Fire. And the city for Detroit is we shall rise again from the ashes, just like many of these other cities. We had the Great Fire of 1805. So Augustus Woodward was sent out here to redesign the city streets. And this was the design he came up with. He called it his hub and spoke pattern. And he was actually friends with Pierre Lafont also. So he was friends with the designer of the Washington, D.C. street layout. And he copied down some of his same designs in his personal notebook. So when he came out to Detroit and the city had just coincidentally burned down, he now had the opportunity to bring in what he called his hub and spoke pattern. So I'm showing you here in the center, this is what was going to be called Grand Circus. And in the bottom was Campus Martius. I'm just going to show you some of the symbolism that fits perfectly over this ancient map.
Campus Martius.
Wow. Yeah, we'll get to Campus Martius, Roby. So
Wow.
the New Atlantis concentric rings fit perfect over this, design. Three-dimensional pyramids, if you were looking down from above, fit perfectly over this design. Templar crosses fit perfectly over this design. But more to what I think he was intending, of course, the pentagram is, fits exactly twice into this map, as does the hexagram and hexagon. So in that one map, there's actually lunar and solar symbolism that could be incorporated. But, as we're looking at this map, it's a lot. Imagine 1805, the people of Detroit just couldn't quite go along with it. So this is what they ended up incorporating, the bottom portion of the map. And, same symbolism got incorporated. He managed to work in the Freemasonic scale and the pentagram, just like his buddy Pierre Lafont, Washington, D.C. So what I want to show you today is at the base of this pentagram street layout, that's going to be Campus Martius that Romy just pointed out. Martius stands for Mars. This is Campus Mars. But before we get there, what they wanted to build there was this giant pyramid, identical to the size of the Great Pyramids. But once again, Detroit couldn't quite afford it, so it never came into realization. But, great idea. And especially when we get further along and see all the pyramid symbolism that does show up, it's nice to know they planned on building a huge pyramid. But so they didn't build the pyramid, but what is there at the base of the pentagram is Campus Martius. And when you zoom into Campus Martius, it's the same pentagon symbolism that's in the street layout. So directly at the base of the pentagram street layout, right here, is now a pentagrammal building. And this is known as the Meridian Building. This is Campus Mars. There's a giant soldiers and sailors monument that sits right out front of Campus Mars. There's the newest sculpture is this cause sculpture. It's called Waiting. It's got these two Mickeys with these crossed out eyes standing here at Campus Mars, just waiting for something.
Very strange.
Yeah, what are those supposed to be?
It's very strange.
What are they supposed to be? Like, do they have a sign in front of the statue that says, like, this is a dead mouse or something? Because it's clearly skull and crossbones. The face, at least.
Meets Mickey Mouse?
Yeah. Yeah, say the sculpture, his name is Kaws, Kaws. And he does these sculptures all across the country, and they all have these crossed out eyes like this. I've seen like a Cookie Monster one like this, where it had these big crossed out eyes.
What is this
a couple
building
different
too?
Mickey ones like this. This is called the Meridian Building, and this is the building at Campus Mars.
Oh shit!
And
this is
it's
okay.
on the shape of
wow.
Interesting.
Yeah, the building itself is a pentagram.
So the other sculptures this artist has done in other places, were they in significant building places as well? Like how much? I'm wondering if he's like one of these esoteric artists that just gets paid by different states to do, or different cities to do sculptures for them in random places.
In this case, the guy who basically owns this building and runs this building, super wealthy guy in Detroit. His name is Dan Gilbert. I believe he owns Quicken Loans, and he paid to have this sculpture placed here. He called it a gift to the city of Detroit. And this sculpture, this is only like 2 or 3 years old. This is pretty new. It's one of the newest sculptures in town, newer sculptures. And so he's waiting. They're looking over at the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, Freedom on top. And Freedom, she looks directly down beneath her at another pentagram in stone. And this is this marking for Detroit's point of origin. And this is where Augustus Woodward put his instruments and measured the pentagram in the streets of Detroit from. So right where he made his measurements from is called the point of origin. They put a big pentagram right there. And I take people on tours down there, and
What is
for whatever reason, people think, well,
what the gentleman's standing on? What is the material made of? It looks green.
yeah, it's like a hard, let's say a fiberglass or plastic, and it actually has a map, the city map. So you got the pentagram map inside of that piece of plastic, and about 5 or 6 feet below that piece of plastic, there's a giant boulder that's buried there, and it's an ancient boulder that supposedly has always been the sacred boulder at the heart of Detroit. So that's why they decided to make this point the point of origin, because the sacred boulder has always been here. So below this pentagram is this ancient rock about 5 or 6 feet below.
I wonder what the rock is made of. Is it like quartz or magnetite? Is it
How'd the rock get underground?
Yeah, there's no pictures of it. It's kind of a mystery. Some people say it's not even there anymore. Other people say it's there. So I've never seen an actual picture of the so-called stone. There's all kinds of tunnels everywhere under here. Tunnels everywhere. But so when I took the tours down here, and this wasn't even part of my tour.
Look at this guy.
As I pointed it out, everybody thought they would stand on it. They could feel that energy, right here at the point of origin. And so it's one of the tour spots. Now people love it. Now in Stargate Symbolism, Stargate the movie, the Stargate symbol for point of origin fits the map also. And that's a synchronicity. But, it fits perfect. So now I just want to show how this symbol of the pentagram, we've seen it in the streets layouts, we've seen it in the building. At the base of the street layout, you got cars driving around it that were built here with the hood ornament of the pentagram. And I know we're all familiar with Peter Shampoo and his biomes. So I like to point out that his biome over in Michigan is the pentagram. And his pentagram, if you extend the biome lines from his pentagram, they point to sacred spots across the world. Machu Picchu, Easter Island, Rensselaer Chateau. But the reason I like to show it is because, I make the point, you can scale this symbol down from a map looking down on the state of Michigan. And if you scale it down to the base of that pentagram, you're at Detroit, where you have a pentagram street layout. You scale it down to the base of that pentagram, you have a pentagonal building. Scale it down to the base of that pentagonal building, and you got a pentagonal glass pyramid. And like I said, around that, you have cars driving with the pentagonal hood ornaments. So we're looking at portal symbolism, and go ahead, Mark.
The point of origin that they were standing on, where is that on the map? Is that in the circus in the center? Is that at a different point on the map? Where is that?
That is dead smack right here and right at the base of the pentagram.
Okay.
That's interesting too.
Yep.
Isn't I think the pentagram is a symbol for Venus, and Venus is
absolutely
the woman, and the womb is the sacred portal. So
look, the shape of 5 is like the shape of the body, right? You're right in the genitals there, just right into Venus's labia.
Yep. That's a great point, because that's my next slide. That was what I was going to point out. When we're looking at portal symbolism, the symbol, the pentagram, it can symbolize, obviously the star, the heavens. It can symbolize the 5 elements, the earth. It can symbolize the body, the starman with your arms and legs out reaching your head. So it's a one symbol that can connect the upper worlds and the lower worlds to the human body. So, some people always want to say the pentagram's evil, this and that. Well, it could be, but it doesn't have to be, it does not have to be. And back to Campus Mars, just briefly, we're looking at all this pentagonal symbolism at Campus Mars. Coincidentally, on Mars, there's been images sent back of identical symbolism. Here you have the Aeon pyramid on Mars that's identical to the building here at Campus Mars. And that might seem like a stretch, but as we go through this, there's going to be more Mars symbolism that seems just to make its way, into the streets somehow.
Yeah.
And what are the chances that Campus Mars and Mars have identical symbolism?
Mars and Venus.
So we're going to... Yep, and Venus, when Venus makes a pentagram every 8 years, Venus creates a pentagram in the sky also. So that's a definite connection. Now, let's scale it down underneath this glass pentagonal pyramid at the point of origin. That's the last place to scale it down. So, of course, what is underneath there is a giant rainbow bridge, hanging waterfall. It's the largest hanging waterfall in the world. And water starts at the top of this pentagram and falls down each one of these rainbow colored kites until it falls into the pool. But, symbolically speaking, underneath that last pentagram, there's a gateway between worlds. Just like the Norris Rainbow Bridge, symbolically, we're talking about a gateway or portal. And of course, we can talk about our inner rainbow bridge, our chakra systems.
Wow.
So I'd like to point out that the symbol of that pentagram seems to be destined, for this area of Detroit, from the biome to the street maps to the buildings to the point of origin to the cars driving around it. It's everywhere. And, some of it intentional. Yes, of course, Augustus Woodward, he intentionally did that. But the Michigan biome, that wasn't intentional, so sometimes it just worked its way in. And that was all right here. So far, everything we looked at was in this one little area, Campus Mars. So we're going to take a journey south 3 blocks to my favorite place in the world, Hart Plaza. And on the way to Hart Plaza, we'll stop at my favorite building. This is called the Guardian Building. And this used to be known as the Cathedral of Finance. Here you see these 2 stone guardians sitting out front. And this, when I give my lectures down here, This is where I give my lectures. So, yeah, we'll give our talk in here, and then we'll go and do the little tour. And the entire building's done in this Aztec Art Deco style. It's absolutely beautiful. You got these stained glass Native American angels all around the building. And Tiffany's largest clock. Now, if you happen to see the shape of this clock, look close, once again, it's the shape of the pentagram.
The Truvian man.
The Truvian man. So you walk up these stairs, once again at the base of the pentagram, through the legs, through the Tiffany's gateway into the other room, where one of the most incredible murals in Detroit is. This is the Mural of Michigan. And you have a goddess emerging from a portal with her 7 chakras, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All good kids go to heaven. All her chakras ignited, emerging from this portal. My buddy William taking a picture of it.
Okay, so really quick, just so we can keep looking at that. That is the topographical map right there of Michigan. She's laid out on.
Yes.
And those 2 those 2 cornucopias in her arms?
Absolutely.
Other agriculture, is that Isis maybe? Isis,
Venus, absolutely. The divine feminine.
Yeah.
Just like Tara was saying, I've had other slides where I compare it to Venus and Isis before. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
You see some of the little signs up here. You got mining up here, agriculture.
Wow.
Does it say manufacture
It's
where the car
it's a
is?
beautiful painting.
What does it say where the car is?
Yeah, manufacture.
Okay.
I think it says manufacture.
Huh.
What's the top right?
But
Fishing,
Farming.
commerce,
Fishing.
mining.
Oh, fishing. Oh. And you got the scale, caduceus scale on the other one, like the Libra scales, but had like
Justice.
the caduceus snake going up it. It's a pretty sweet looking pair of scales, honestly. I was like, wow, I want me a set of that around my desk.
And if we're looking at Egyptian symbolism, we found a lot of Egyptian symbolism. We could look at that as the weighing of the heart ceremony too. That's the same symbol the Egyptians used for the weighing of the heart ceremony. If your heart was lighter than the feather, you were allowed to go through the portal to the afterlife.
And that's a thing too with the St. Louis marches, right? Isn't that in that structure they have a literal big scale? It's like, what a trip.
Absolutely. So then if you go, this was the Cathedral of Finance. So you go down into the basement and they have all the ancient bank vaults. And, if anyone ever makes it to Detroit, this is where I give my lecture, in the vaults. So it's a pretty cool place to go and have a lecture. Outside the building, the top spire. The spire is an octagon, which represents a balance between the material and invisible forces. And there used to be a beautiful beams of light that used to beam from the top of this, but they're not active at the moment. So that's the Guardian building.
The 8 represents the 8 winds too. That is also synonymous with that portal symbolism. The 8 winds coming together create like the infinity symbol, which is that 0 point that opens to the next realm or world too, and also could be synonymous with the rainbow bridge, like I'm just going off my head here, but with the white light and through the prism, which would be Earth and all these structures, and it creates that rainbow bridge, maybe.
Absolutely, that's awesome. Absolutely, yeah, optics. And all these buildings back in the 1920s when Detroit was booming, all of these buildings had giant rainbow colored beams beaming off the top of them. Wow. So if you see some of the old photos, it looks otherworldly, man. They're just shooting rainbow lights all around the city, but in the old days, it's pretty cool. So this is the spirit of Detroit. Now we're 1 block away from Hart Plaza. This sits right outside of Hart Plaza, and this is kind of the symbol for Detroit. You'll see it on all the T-shirts, on all the cop cars. This is Detroit's symbol. Really cool. They'll dress it up in a Red Wing shirt or a Detroit Lions shirt, depending who's playing that weekend. This was created by an artist named Marshall Fredericks, and you can see he's connecting humanity with the stars. There's no denying what's happening here. You got a spirit connecting humanity with the stars, and here's one of his other sculptures in town. This is called Star Dreams. So.
And who's this artist? Any fun stories on this artist, Sir Fredericks here?
He was a local teacher here in Michigan, and I believe it was Birmingham, Michigan. And he was a sculptor, and he has pieces all over Michigan. He has all over the world, but Michigan in particular. And most of them are spiritual or stellar. And I'm trying to think of a couple other ones you might be familiar with. In the city center in Cleveland, if anyone wants to look it up, he has a really cool one, kind of like the Star Dream one here. But he was a pretty famous artist. He had sculptures all around the world, But Spirit of Detroit, this is our symbol, our logo, and it's everywhere. I got a couple shirts, couple hats, got this guy on it,
Nice.
Now we are across the road from Hart Plaza. This fist is pointing at Hart Plaza. This is the memorial to Joe Louis. And it sits on its own cornerstone, as you can see. It's surrounded by a road, so it's its own cornerstone and this pyramidal contraption. This giant black fist of power. Here's a different angle of it. Very Masonic, obviously very Masonic. Now, if you stand in a particular place. You got to stand right here on the west side of the sculpture and look to the east. If you stand in the correct place, you'll see Freemasonic George Washington across the road in front of the old Mariners Church.
Nice.
And this was done intentionally by the Masons. This was actually a gift from the Masons, George Washington was. And what they wanted you to see was the laying of the cornerstone memorial. You see all these paintings of George Washington laying the cornerstone. Well, this is the same symbolism right here at the base of Hart Plaza, if you know where to stand.
Yeah, they got the lever and the crane set up right there with the fists underneath, and it's holding up, kind of like it is acting as a crane too. Because I saw like some ropes in there. Yeah, what a trip! Yep. Yeah, man. And
there's no denying it, you know.
No denying it. You can't. You absolutely cannot. Like even absolute mainstream, just regular history is that George Washington wore the apron. He had the apron. Like he's a Mason. They were, you know. So it's like, here you go, man. Oof. There's been such a steady climb too. Just keep going, man. Like Detroit is thick, thick.
So while we're on the Masons, I won't get too deep into the Masons, so get back to Hart Plaza, but huge Masonic history in Detroit. We have the largest Masonic temple in the world. And this is a picture of the cornerstone. Wow. The reason I'm showing you a picture of the cornerstone is because I found these pictures on the Detroit Masons website of when they were laying the cornerstone. And just how many Masons were here to witness the laying of the cornerstone in Detroit. It's just a sea of these white bald guys watching them lay this cornerstone.
Yeah, look at these guys.
So just, you know.
Some of them are looking at the camera too.
It's creepy.
Oh yeah, you got boys with the aprons on the statue. What statue is that?
I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. No, I don't even know if that statue's still there or not.
Oh, crazy!
But I just wanted to make the point of what a big deal.
You say, Mark?
Somebody who. Oh. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
You go.
No, Tara was gonna say something, but go ahead. We're at Crowley now.
Well, I was just gonna point out that George Washington was also in Nashville and associated with the rainbow again. And
he saw the vision of the rainbow, right? And no.
He's painted on
his
the
book. That's in oh goodness, I'm forgetting his name. We just had him on. It was in his
William.
Yeah, William Henry. It was in William Henry's book. He was talking about on top of the rotunda, there's the George Washington riding inside of the on top of the rainbow like Odin.
Inside a pentagram. So one guy who did recognize, you know, this big Freemasonic thing going on in Detroit was Aleister Crowley. So he came to Detroit to try to get in on this. And his idea was he was going to help him build this temple, and he's going to have all the different sets of Freemasons occupy this temple, which they do to this day. But his set was going to be on top, and it was going to make him the leader of this entire temple, and basically the Freemasons around the world for that matter. And well, the public wasn't really going for it. They were having different rituals going on in town. Crowley was supposedly doing sex rituals and scoring mescaline and just doing all kinds of stuff that the Masons supposedly didn't want to have a bad rap from. And there's actually a book about all this. It's called Panic in Detroit, if anyone wants to check it out. It's a pretty crazy book. It's good stories in it. But the gist of me telling this story is that Crowley, not only did he want to be the leader of the Freemasons, he wanted to start what he termed the new Aeon of Horus in Detroit. And in the new Aeon of Horus, the chief deity was the Egyptian goddess Nuit. And that will become important in a few minutes when we get to Hart Plaza. So that's kind of some little bit of the Freemasonic background, but that leads us all the way up to close to modern times, to my favorite place, Hart Plaza, which was imagined in 1947, which is an important year, by architect Eero Saarinen, who happens to be the same architect. 47. And this is the same guy who imagined and designed the Gateway Arch. He also imagined Hart Plaza. And he had both of these visions in 1947. Coincidentally, the same year Aleister Crowley had just passed away. But it took about 30 years till Detroit had enough money to build Hart Plaza, and they brought in this Japanese-American artist, Asama Naguchi. And Asama Naguchi came to town and built a plaza. And what he did was he orientated it and he correlated it to the Giza pyramids. And what I mean by this is he correlated several of the monuments, the amphitheater, the Horus and Sun fountain, and the pyramid to the pyramids. And then there's a causeway that leads to the Sphinx. Well, there's a causeway here that leads to a giant obelisk or pylon. So not only did he align it to the pyramids, but it also corresponds to the constellation of Orion. So what I like to do is go through these couple monuments that correlate to see if there's actually any symbolism. Is it, a legit correlation, so to speak? So we'll start with the amphitheater. And one thing we know about amphitheaters, they're transmitters and receivers of frequencies and vibration, tunes and tones. And these different parks, you'll always find these amphitheaters, and they'll be by the river most times for whatever reason. And this is the place where, people go and they soak up these tunes and tones. And I like to show these pictures. This is one of the concerts they have here at Hart Plaza called the Movement Festival. And you can just give you an idea of Hart Plaza in action. How many people are actually, walking around these monuments, possibly catching a vibe off of them. So I point out here, this is actually a quote from William Henry, that music is one of the highest forms of spiritual and mythological communication. It holds the keys to deciphering the mysteries of the ancients. This is why so many of these parks have amphitheaters. Sounds, tunes, or tones can trigger memories, activate emotions, and open our hearts. And, they do. So I think, we talked about pyramids being transmitters and receivers.
Ripping off of the keys real quick, just because it's so fresh on my tongue. I was reading this morning about the Key of Solomon and that whole work of different antiquated magic and such in esoteric realms, and just the word the key, the key, the keystone, and the key of music. I feel like every key of music is a different tonal frequency. And so when talking in magical terms or portal terms or, terms of resonance to vibrate a certain FREQ, that it kind of just opened a little rabbit hole in my mind when I was reading about the Key of Solomon and reading in these books this morning, that music is a high form of spiritual and mythological communication. It's a huge part of the frequency atmosphere, the atmospheric frequencies that we have and experience, and so, it's just the amphitheaters, man, you're right. They're always here. They're always at these sites, and very, very important in human history as well, dating back all the way to Sir Vitruvius himself, that great architect.
Exactly. Yeah, the amphitheaters aren't something new. Like you pointed out, amphitheaters are one of the most ancient structures there are. So it's no surprise at how important they are at these parks too. So that's the first correlation. The amphitheater is a transmitter and receiver, and we can possibly think of pyramids as transmitters and receivers. Second correlation to the next pyramid would be, the Horus and Sun Memorial Fountain. And I point out just the name Horus itself. I think that's enough. We can say there's a correlation. That's actually Horus Horace Dodge, though, the Dodge automobile pioneer, so it's spelled a little bit different. Now, according to Asama Naguchi, because he built this Horus and Sun fountain, he said the symbolism to this fountain won't be recognized until the time is right. So hopefully the time is right. If not, hopefully we're getting close. But you can see at night, this thing looks like, it's from another world. Kind of looks like a UFO or something about to take off. The daytime, it shoots out blasts of water and creates rainbows, and people go down there and look like they're playing in the rainbow. This lady actually didn't know she was in the rainbow. She asked me to stop taking her picture. But from my perspective, she was in the rainbow. I had to show her what I was doing. But I think we can use the symbolism, Horus Dodge. And his son, by the way, his son name was Horus Jr. In Egyptian symbolism, there's a Horus the son and a Horus the elder. So I think it's fair that we say the Horus and Dodge fountain contains Egyptian symbolism. And just to make sure it contains symbolism, I thought, well, one day I was feeling thankful and went to visit his memorial off 8 Mile, Detroit, and the symbolism followed him all the way to his death. This is where his brother and John, they're buried here at Woodlawn Cemetery in this Egyptian mausoleum. And it's flanked by obelisks, and you can actually creep up these stairs here. And if you peek inside the door, the back of the mausoleums, a giant stained glass depiction of the pyramids. So there's no question that the symbolism followed Horus Dodge, and he happened to be born in Niles, Michigan. Another coincidence, like the Niles River. So
where's Niles, Michigan?
I was feeling it's kind of southern Michigan, southwest Michigan.
Well, what's interesting is you have all these like alchemical and esoteric names for car companies, and then you have one like Dodge, and you're like, yeah, Dodge, that's just a normal one, or Ford. Yeah, right? And then you look into these guys' lives, and they're like way more esoteric than like Mercury, or any of the other car, or Saturn, or like it's crazy. This like when you think of Dodge, you're thinking of Horus, you're thinking that Egyptian symbolism.
Nuts. And then so Dodge didn't start Chrysler, did they? Or they bought Chrysler at a later point? When did that merger happen? Because were they always the same?
It started off as Dodge and it merged into Chrysler, I believe, after the Dodge brothers were already gone, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. I was going to say Chrysler is almost like, it reminds me of Christ or Crystal. I wonder, a little bit of that history, but I know that Dodge and Chrysler are connected.
The Pleiadians, Subaru is the Seven Sisters. I mean, there's one. It's not just American car brands that do it,
Yeah, right.
Well, then, so Detroit, I'm not sure if these are in your slides as much, but from growing up here on the West Coast, like what you hear Detroit mainly is that it's Motor City. And so it's known for having all these, because Ford was also in Detroit, right? Or no?
Yep, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, okay, cool. And Henry Ford was
clearly there's a lot of energy Ford, manifesting, literal horsepower, manpower, engine power, energy manifesting in this place. Wow.
Yep. Transportation. But so after finding all of that information on Horus Dodge, and after making the trip to his mausoleum, which I normally would never do, and finding stuff there, I felt pretty thankful. And I like to tell this story because sometimes you wonder if you're going nuts or, you're on the right track or what. And after, it was literally this day that I took this picture of the pyramids in the back of his mausoleum. I couldn't believe it was in there. And as I was pulling out, I actually said aloud, Horus, man, give me a sign I'm on the right path. This is crazy. And, my car started to spit and sputter, and I was running out of gas. So this is off 8 Mile, a pretty rough part of town. I really didn't want to run out of gas. So I pulled across the road. Luckily, there was I think it's a mobile station. I don't honestly know, but right across the road, there happened to be a gas station. So I sputtered into it up to the pump, and I was pumping gas. happened to glance down just glanced down at my foot, and there's a CH there, and I kept pumping for a minute. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. And I moved my foot, and it literally spelled my name in the concrete, Chad. 5 minutes after I asked for a sign, and you can see it's not wet, like it's been there a while, But so that's the kind of things that there are signs out there that will confirm you're on the right path sometimes,
dude.
So getting back to the Horus Fountain, although it's dedicated to Horus Dodge, the shape of it highly resembles and symbolizes the Egyptian goddess Nuit. And Nuit had 5 children: Isis, Osiris, Nephthys, Set, and Horus. So this was actually the mother of Horus. And, let's not forget that we just talked about Aleister Crowley coming to Detroit, and he wanted to start the new Aeon of Horus, symbolized by the Egyptian goddess Nuit.
Wow.
And now here we have this Horus fountain, I think, symbolized by the Egyptian goddess Nuit. So did Asama Naguchi somehow pick up on Aleister Crowley's, ceremonies he did? Or this could just all be one of those times that this symbolism is destined, for this region again. I can't say for sure.
Crowley is like thick in the consciousness, man. Like when I dug into Crowley before and was going pretty deep on a lot of the stuff, and he popped into my dreams. I had some like crazy lucid dreams, and he was like attached to the back of a guy's neck and was like, because the thing is, like, they said that Crowley could transport to America, but he was like sometimes not here or whatever, especially when he was later in his life all drugged out. Like he's known to be like a shapeshifter and shit. So
no, you're saying he astral projected to America?
You said that.
Yeah, I swear. Yeah, those are some lores behind Sir Crowley.
Huh.
So one of the stories that's funny, bro. One of the stories in Detroit is that when he was in Detroit, he used to wear this big black trench coat, and he would whip the trench coat up over his head, over his face, and he thought he was invisible when he did this. So he would go in places and whip it up like he was, but everybody would be like, "Man, we can see you, Crowley. We can see you." But that's one of the big stories that made it into the newspaper, that he would go in places and act invisible, and everybody would kind of make fun of him.
Wow.
That reminds me of Grandma's Boy. You guys remember that movie?
That's exactly. Yes, exactly.
Well, yeah, I don't.
All right. So,
I was thinking when I saw Nuit, I'm thinking of like the ice that supposedly was in the atmosphere, like an egg, like the Earth, like kind of was in this like egg state, and like you look at that picture of the Egyptian people underneath Nuit, it's almost like a bubble or something, or a dome.
Oh, Ooh.
The ice dome that melted.
She is supposed to, she's supposed to symbolize the sky, and Geb, or her husband, or the people underneath, are supposed to symbolize the mounds, or the primordial mounds, or the earth.
Okay.
And
I knew it's sky
yeah, and if you look at the fountain, it kind of looks like it's water pouring into a mound, kind of. So
For sure.
So those are the first two correlations: the amphitheater, the Horus and Sun fountain, and to the third pyramid, there's actually a pyramid there. You don't gotta look for much symbolism. There's signs pointing to it. It's this way to the pyramid. So there's an actual ziggurat step pyramid right where we're trying to correlate to another pyramid. And where the causeway would lead to the Sphinx, here there's a causeway that leads to this giant pylon. It's 120 foot tall, looks like a transmitter receiver, and it sits right at the entrance to the plaza. This was done by Asama Naguchi too. He said it represents both DNA and also our relationship to the atmosphere, to wind, and to space flight. So this guy, Asama Naguchi, he was kind of next level. Obviously he came here and he built this plaza, correlated it, orientated it, and then built these monuments in it. So, the big question is, did he do this intentionally and not tell anyone? Because he never told anyone, I'm building a plaza, I'm going to correlate it to the Giza pyramids and the constellation of Orion and put all this Egyptian symbolism in it. He did say people will recognize it when the time's right. So I always ask the question, was this intentional and he didn't mention it? Or was this subconscious? Well, as far as intentional, he had just returned from Egypt. This is him and his wife in Egypt on a 2-year sojourn where he said his intentions were to learn about the Egyptians and the relationships they had with their temples. Then he came back to Hart Plaza and, he built this cosmic temple. But was it intentional? Or did he possibly tap into something while he was here? And that sounds out there. I totally understand that. It sounds crazy. But I bring that up because of another project he proposed to do back in the year 1947 again.
Oh, God.
And this was going to be known as the face to be seen from Mars. And what he wanted to do was build this giant earthwork, 2 miles long by a mile wide, have a pillar of a nose a mile tall that was going to look like a face. And you'd only be able to recognize that face if you were as far away as the moon or Mars, hence the name, face to be seen from Mars. And he wanted to build this because this is 1947. He's a Japanese American, and we're dropping nuclear bombs. He's afraid we're going to destroy the world. He wants to let extraterrestrial civilization know that at one time there was a civilized race here on Earth. So, pretty crazy idea, but it becomes weird when 30 years later, NASA sends back images on Mars, what looks like a face, identical, symbolically to Noguchi's. So there's a face on Mars, then there's a face to be seen from Mars. So it makes me wonder, did Naguchi somehow tap into this information? And other people came up with this face on Mars also. A comic book artist, Jack Kirby, in some of his comic books, has the face to be seen from Mars. So, I point out this could have been intentional, and he just what?
Was there anybody did you find on your research who he was getting this funding from? Like who funds these artists just to get to make these sculptures and things? Like, is it because I'm wondering, follow the money. Maybe we could find some answers to him being tapped into a secret society of sorts or something like that.
Yeah, what they do is they have contests. And they will have, in Noguchi's case, I want to say they had 30 guys come down. And they'll have a contest, and they'll have all the artists come and walk around the piece of real estate where they're going to do their design and literally try to get a feel for what would fit in with the surroundings. And then, whoever comes up with the best plans wins the commission. And time and time again, we haven't got to the Stargate yet, but they had the same thing. They'll have this contest, and they'll have, in this case of the Stargate, they had 120 guys come down. And whoever comes up with the best plan that fits in, and in that case, it was a Stargate that happened to fit in with Asama Naguchi's plaza, they'll win the commission. So I guess that's one aspect I've never looked at, guys. I've never looked at who put on the contest. I got back as far as, the contest, but I've never looked at who put the contest on. So maybe that's something we can start looking into a little bit.
Yeah, man. I just say that because I'm what's the next step? Because I'm where did the money come from? Why do these? But if it is something as basic or simple as just city planning, and most of the esotericism comes from the artist itself, then that's not as fun as But if
I think it's a in the know kind of thing. Like certain artists are hinting at concepts that people in the know trend. They trend because they're recognizing. Most people recognize who are also in the know. I mean, it's not always true for every single art, but I think with like all of these Freemasons and other people who are, interested in this stuff, but behind closed doors, this is one way for them to sort of flaunt what they're really interested in. Because think about it, everybody wants to go and show out, like get their big fancy Lamborghini or when they have money, right? So if you're one of these esoteric rich guys, you don't flaunt your money with, a Lamborghini. You flaunt it with some crazy, plaza that lives on for thousands of years, like that's how these people think. They're not thinking of like temporary, showboating. They're creating things that are going to be remembered. I mean, in a lot of cases, seems like Dodge, right? This guy, Horace Dodge, he made a lot of people money. So like he's going to become somebody who gets like, what's the word? Deified. Meanwhile, like the person who commissioned it, maybe nobody remembers them, but their energy is transferred on through their remembrance of this other person.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Hiding behind, because that's the thing. So half the time we'll never know who was behind behind the scenes at the time, but that's the most esoteric of it all.
Well, you guys are getting me interested in reading this book that because we mentioned Crowley earlier. I wonder if they talk about his time in Detroit. I've got this book, Crowley in America. I've only read little pieces of it, but yeah, I haven't come across the Detroit part yet. But yeah, this is a portal. What are we looking at here with this odd paperclip looking thing?
Yeah, this is actually in Cleveland. And the reason I'm showing this is before Asama Naguchi came to Detroit, he didn't really do any portal symbolism or stellar symbolism, or before Egypt in that matter. But once he left Detroit, he went to Cleveland. He created this. He created the portal. That's what it's called. And then he went to Hawaii and he created what he called the Sky Gate. He said it's a symbolic gateway to outer space, a gateway to the cosmos. So when he left Detroit, he had portals and gateways on his mind, like no question about it. His next several monuments were portals and gateways. So that's kind of where Asama Naguchi leaves the scene. He leaves us with, we'll recognize his symbolism when the time is right. He leaves town creating portals and gateways and leaves us with the plaza correlated to the stars and the pyramids. And that's in the 70s. We really haven't got into yet what even got me interested in all this, which is the stargates and all the gateway symbolism. None of that emerges until 2001 on Detroit's tricentennial, its 300th birthday. I call it the emergence of the gates.
Wow.
And all of this
Auspicious.
is really just this was just a primer. Yeah, this was just a primer for a place to put all this gateway symbolism. So I think I'll save that. Maybe I'll save that for next week.
Oh, there you go.
How does that sound for you guys?
Actually great. That's actually a good idea. We've gone
I'll
deep.
save that for next week. I'll give you just a couple little glimpses. We're going to look at the Stargate next week.
Sounds good.
We'll look at, we'll look at professional sports players saying they're coming through the Stargate. We'll look at the Great Lakes Triangle. Bunch of missing people. UFOs, missing ships.
Yes.
And we'll get to the good stuff. We'll do some Dog Man. We'll do some Water Panthers and some Thunderbirds. And we'll get into some underwater anomalies.
Wow.
Save all that for next week.
All right. Wow. Well, I asked for a cliffhanger and I think we got one. The 300th birthday in 2001, and we just yesterday was the 21st anniversary of 9/11, which happened in 2001. It was certainly a monumentous year in a lot of ways, good and bad. But wow. Well, Yeah, this is.
Let me say something real
go
quick.
Ahead. Go
Mark.
ahead.
You just mentioned the 2001 anniversary, so I'm gonna just bring this up. If you look through the Transcending Gateway as it's being built right here in 2001, the building you're looking at, that's the template for the World Trade Centers. Minoru Yamasaki came to Detroit and built that white building to see if his plans for the trade centers would hold up. And here we have a transcending monument being built in 2001, about the same time the trade centers are coming down.
You tell me Asama Naguchi planned the design for the World Trade Centers?
Minoru Yamasaki.
Oh, okay.
Different Japanese American.
But right next to each other, though. Wow. In Detroit, they have two things right next to each other. Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, that takes it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that architects will do that. Like when I was living in Portland, there's this really beautiful bridge called the St. John's Bridge over in the north part of town. That's like, they call Portland Bridge City, which I think they call multiple other cities Bridge City as well. But there's a lot of bridges there. And then one of the most spectacular bridges isn't even in like the downtown part of Portland, but it's up in the northern part. And it's apparently exactly 1/5 the size of the Golden Gate Bridge. And the guy who built the Golden Gate Bridge built a template model in Portland. And it's funny that they do that, you know, they'll take like these big grand ideas and then build them on a smaller scale and then go build the real ones somewhere else. But I wonder, yeah, that's interesting. Wow. What a cliffhanger, dude. What a great, friggin' awesome time that was. That flew by. 2 hours just flew by.
Oh, it's only been an hour 40, but yeah, 2 hours almost.
Okay.
But still, I think this is a good place to stop, unless we have some questions for Chad here. Not that we need to rush. We could always wait until the next segment. I like the way we're doing this because, you know, we've had many different guests at this point in time, and we've had guests take a couple different approaches. And I think what's cool about having someone with your expertise, Chad, taking us through multiple different segments of this, you know, really stacked area, it gives people a little more leeway. Like some people are going to focus more on the ancient history. Some people are going to focus more on the paranormal folklore. Some people are going to focus on the architecture. You know, don't overwhelm yourself. If you want to be a guest on this show, you know, just 2 of those portions is good enough. You know, if you take a whack at it, you know, each episode's about an hour and a half to 2 hours long. And you know, with how many slides do you have, Chad? Like an expert like yourself with 300 slides, how many did we get through today?
I think 150, 160.
Right. So, and that's because you've probably presented many times, but you know, don't overwhelm yourselves, folks. Like Chad has done this before. He's a pro. We don't expect everyone who's going to be a guest on this show to have that many slides. You know, just 20 to 50, I think, is a good range, you know, and if you get crazy and get 100, 200, maybe we'll have you back for part 2. Obviously, Chad, we're going to have you back for part 2 next week. And I was thinking we should do an episode on Hawaii at some point. I don't know. For some reason, like in 1 week, like all of my friends and podcast people I know from Hawaii hit me up. So I'm like, maybe we do like a Hawaii group show. So if anyone listening is on the Big Island and they want to participate, we might do like a Big Island big group show because I don't know, it just feels right for a place like Hawaii.
Shoots.
Tara spent a lot of time there too. So.
I'm wearing my Hawaiian shirt.
Oh, right on. Yeah, shout out to Chad for picking up the merch and being such an awesome supporter of everything I do, because that really helps when people pick up the merch. And that's not not even the first thing you've picked up. It says my family thinks I'm crazy there. So you think that's cool? let me know. I'll take that, and I'll send you the link so you could pick up your own copy. But for now, it's limited edition, that sweatshirt that you're wearing right now. So if people want it, they got to hit me up and let me know. But yeah, Roman, anything you want to plug? Chad, anything you want to plug before we go?
Yeah, I wanna just say, like, you know, for anybody interested in looking up the mysteries of their backyard and the history of their town, you know, hit us up and we'll like send you a little template or some ideas too. And once you get going, it just starts flowing. Once you start digging in, it really just starts coming. So, but one piece of advice I'll give is look up the Mason halls. look up the caves, look up old businesses from like the 1800s, and then just follow the Freemason halls, and you'll find some cool stuff, and plug in weird people's names into Wikipedia, and yeah, just get down the rabbit hole, y'all, and fear not, but please feel to come on the show and to look up your towns, and let's get this going. We're trying to create a map of the entire country so that you can type in any town as you're on your way from the East Coast to the West Coast and listen to it as you pass through the town. We are painting the pictures. We are all painting the pictures, baby.
Yes.
So that's just want to give the people encouragement. We want to talk to you guys.
Yes, we want to talk to anyone, and don't feel like you have to be a podcaster, or you have to be an author, or even like, you know, some wacko like me or Roman. Like you could just be a normal person who has a job and you know, come on the show and talk to us. And hey, like, you know, like I said, 10, 15, 20, 30 slides is not a lot to do. Even if we only spend an hour talking to you, that's fine. I think, you know, as long as we can cover as many places as we can and spread this movement far and wide. Because yes, I want to make a map one day, and who knows, maybe a book will come out of this. I know Roman and I, when we talk on the phone, Roman's always pumped and amped about different projects he's working on, and Chad, as an, you know, you being an author, it's very cool to work with you here. It's a privilege. You know, you've definitely inspired Roman and I hope you've inspired Tara, and I hope you've inspired everybody who listens, you know, and yeah, I can certainly say you've inspired me, because since we've podcasted, I've written 2 booklets that people can buy from my Ko-fi store. And yeah, it's just awesome to be a part of this. So Chad, please tell folks where they could go to support you and pick up your work and get inspired, because you got a lot of awesome stuff about Michigan and Detroit.
Thanks, Mark. Man, you guys humble me. I appreciate that. Yeah, I got a website, chadstuemke.com. Stuemke is Stuemke. I got a digital book over there, Stargate Detroit, and mostly just all my articles and a couple of videos. Just like Mark said, just enjoy the information. And I'm with Mark, Romy. This map we're going to make, man, it'll be like nothing that's ever been done before. There's never been another history project coming up with the kind of history, the kind of mysteries that we're talking about. So it's going to be a one-of-a-kind project, man. I can't wait to see the way it's developing. It's sweet. It's sweet. And I thank you guys too.
I love it. Thank you. I love it. And yeah, I'm stoked to get some more experts on like yourself. I've been talking to a few. We actually just got in touch, thanks to Michael Wan, with a dude out in Pittsburgh who hopefully we can get on the show soon and talk about Pittsburgh, and then Mike himself. We'd love to get Mike on the show now that we've got a format together. It's definitely time. And then another interesting person that we listeners can look forward to hearing us interview is Steven Snyder. I recently had him on my show, and he loves the concept and would love to be a guest on this show. So yeah, a lot of very interesting topics soon to come, but hey, let's not belay that cliffhanger, folks. Tricentennial 300th, we're gonna get into the Hart Plaza, we're gonna get into Water Panthers, the Portal, the Dogman. This part 2 is gonna be killer. Thank you, Chad, for being our tour guide here. And listeners, thank you for listening. Support us any way you can. You can check out the show on Rockfin if you don't like the YouTube ads. Not that I think we have any ads on our YouTube channel, at least for the Esoteric America videos. And then you can also follow us on Instagram. Stay in touch. And then, of course, if you're watching on the YouTube or Rockfin and you're driving one day and you can't use YouTube, you can always tune into the show on our RSS feed, which can be found on any podcast app, Spotify, Apple, all the places. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, folks, and get out there, start exploring.